Welcome to Big Blend Radio's California Employment Law Podcast featuring San Diego attorney Ward Heinrichs. Welcome, everyone. We are excited to have Ward back here on Big Blend Radio to give us a mid-year reminder of the new California minimum wage laws for 2025. And actually, this is part one of two. Well, it's actually, I would say part two of three, because in January, he gave us a big rundown of all the new laws of 2025. But we all know California likes to add new laws throughout the year. So today we're going to talk about the Fast Recovery Act update and minimum wage and salary in California, touch on San Diego minimum wage and some health care workers minimum wage issues. Ward, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Well, I know you've been on vacation a little bit, a little summertime. You've been to our national parks, right? So that's two of our national parks, Yellowstone, Crater Lake, and you've got to. I mean, I don't know how you deal with all that fine print every single day. So I'm really happy to hear that you get out there into nature and
Oh, yeah, it's a great contrast because really I do sit at my desk a lot. And now with computers and everything, a lot more than I even did 20 years ago. Oh, and when I go to court, I usually do it through Zoom or Teams. And so really, you sit at your desk a lot more than you used to. So getting out to these national parks is just a great distraction. I love it. I love nature. And so these are things that are on my bucket list. Yellowstone was on it. Of course, Crater Lake was on it. Took my kids to Crater Lake just last weekend. Unbelievable. Please, everyone get out there. And my sister and brother want to do because I, showed them all the pictures, said how great it was, and they want to do that September of 2026. So still doing it, still pushing it.
So I know we're talking about minimum wage, but what are we going to talk about? Like what happens to federal workers? All the federal workers going out. I know that's not what you touch on, right? As an employment law attorney, you don't deal with federal workers all of that, right? So I am tying in your park experiences, but I thought I'd touch on it so that people understand what an employment law attorney would do. Would anybody hired by the federal government ever get a lawyer to represent them if they thought that they were laid off? So many people have been laid off that people are like, whoa, what's going on, including our national parks and our park service. The 63 are safe in our national parks, the main ones. So things are changing up a lot. So I think a lot of people are looking at employment law, and we're going to get to the minimum wage for sure, but looking at what's happening to federal workers, researchers, university employees, all of these layoffs. Can there be an employment law kickback? Would that be something that an employment law, like an attorney like you, would handle when it comes to federal universities? We're looking now at a lot of other people being, the ICE issues and all of that. So are you getting calls about this kind of thing? So I'm just curious to see what you do handle and what you don't before we get into the minimum wage, because I think people are sitting there wondering if they're in a new circumstance going, should I sue? Should I not? Who do I call other than Ghostbusters?
Well, I have represented people who have worked in various vocations for UCSD, for instance, and San Diego State. And usually that's some type of administrative work. There's an administrative law, and I have to bone up on it because it's not something I typically do. And I tell people that, it's not something I typically do. I'm going to have to do some extra work to really help you. But the truth is there's not many employment attorneys who really do that kind of thing anyway. So you might find someone who does, but probably not, honestly. And so, but that doesn't mean that employment attorneys wouldn't do this. They would just probably say the same thing that I would say is, look, this is not something I do every day.
It's an abnormal thing right now. Yeah.
It's a little weird, but I have to bone up on it and then I can help you out. And so I've done that for the UC system and the San Diego State, the state system. But what I have not done is help people who've been terminated by the federal government, employees of the federal government. And that is a real narrow specialty that I'm sure some employment attorneys with big firms probably have someone who knows a fair amount of that kind of thing. Smaller firms, probably not, unless they just happen to have a specialty in that area. But again, if you're looking for a plaintiff's employment attorney, you're probably going to have a hard time finding someone who really knows that area. And I know there's some out there, but I can't even refer you to one. I don't know one.
Oh, but this is a special time. That's why I'm asking.
It is a special time. And again, if someone called me and said, I can't, I've looked around, I can't find anyone. I said, well, here's what I'm going to have to do to get in a position where I can really help you. And it's going to take me studying this. So, and it's not something that honestly that I could do for free. It'd just be too
No,
much.
no.
So, we'll see how that all pans out. And there have been, I don't know about cases, but there certainly have been objections to people being fired. Now, you know
Mm,
what, who I have represented are employees of government contractors. And that's a little different. That's more closely
oh,
related to what I do. And I've done a couple class actions actually for employees. I used to, now I do
mhm.
mostly employer work, but back in the day I did employee work mostly. And so that I have done. And in San Diego, that is really complicated. I don't want to get into the weeds too much on this, but there's a constitutional provision that allows the federal government to take certain control of certain areas for like forts and
Yeah.
military. And what law actually applies after that happens depends on how they took the land.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's really complicated.
Well,
I had a
San Diego,
class
you
action
got
like that.
Coronado and
Oh my
all the
gosh.
bases
No, it's nutty.
oceanside.
You don't even
And
have any idea the patchwork of different types of what they call enclaves. These are called federal enclaves. And you can look that up. You could look up. In fact, a guy who wrote
that's a good
the
thing.
only book I know on it mentioned me because I had him as an expert, and he was a U.S. attorney, and he'd faced this on the criminal side, but he didn't know much about it on the civil side. And I had of class action facing this with these guards working at different spots, and some of them had this law applying and some of them had the other law applying. It's like, oh my
Wow.
gosh, this is a nightmare. But we were able to settle it for a good chunk of money. He mentioned my case in his book. I know that stuff pretty well, and so I would be pretty good at handling that kind of case, for contractors.
Now, what about with all the farm workers? Because California is a hotbed of agriculture. And this is a huge fear. And I actually know specific cases right now, but I go like, is that an employment attorney thing? Or is that like you need to get an immigration attorney? And from what I hear is like when someone applies for work, you just ask for their normal documentation like you would for anybody else hiring for a position, right? So because aren't they
Well,
also
yeah,
I
you're
know.
right. But the I-9 is more important if you're an immigrant. For most people who've been here a long time, you still have to give the I, but it's perfunctory. But for someone who is speaking Spanish in California, that's probably a much bigger deal than it used to be last year. And so the I, which declares that you're a citizen and you show some proof, you Social Security, other things, would be critical, I think, for that type of person. And so I think it's mostly really an immigration issue, but it does spill over because I know immigration attorneys who've been getting calls, all day long
That
who are
is crazy.
scared. And the problem is they really can't get paid for that kind of stuff, and so they're overwhelmed with this, and it's hard for them to bill it out because people are saying I'm frightened, and maybe it's a present client, maybe it's not, and then of course all their strategies can change too, and how they're going to try to defend these cases. So that's the biggest impact. But in California, if you're not legal, and even if you don't have legal paperwork, the employment laws still apply. That's black
Oh,
letter law in California. So you can still sue your employer, demand documents, do all that stuff, and it's not supposed to affect you. The problem is if you make a stink now, maybe that's a red flag that
yeah,
someone
you're not going
might.
to win right now. Not a good time to do it.
It's a little trickier now, but it really was no big deal until Trump took office recently. Yeah, you could just enforce your
Yeah.
employment law rights,
I,
even
I
if you weren't legal.
I have a friend who, and I didn't know you then, and
Hmm.
she had a farm and she put someone on salary, but didn't have the laws of the minimum wage salary thing, which is, so here's a good segue into what we're supposed to talk about, right? But I'm
Yeah.
bridging the gap. It's true. She didn't quite have the new law thing between salary, minimum wage, or whatever. She basically said, okay, you're the manager, and didn't do one little step. But he got paid a bunch and he wasn't doing a bunch. In fact, she was trying to fire him because he's also stealing. You know what? He took her to the cleaners. And
Yeah.
that was a very hard pill to swallow because she was a sweet little lady and did everything, like paid people's tuition. She did so much. And this guy just totally used and took her to the cleaners and used her. It was terrible. And she had a lawyer who was used to practicing law in a different country. And just when Nancy and I sat down with him to do like a statement thing, we're just like, you I didn't know you then, Ward. This was years and years and years ago. And it was that one little thing. And he could use his rights, even though, exactly like you said, he could use employment law rights on her.
Even though he wasn't technically legally in the country? Is that what
Yeah.
you're talking about?
But she thought he was. And then she's like, well, it's messy. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. Oh, no, absolutely.
It's a whole
messy.
big mess. So the minimum wage thing, so I'm making a really strong point here. When I say he took her to the cleaners, I mean it. And this is
Well, I can project what you're probably talking about. You're probably talking about someone who wasn't paid enough to be an exempt employee. And as an attorney, if you're a plaintiff's attorney, that's the case you want, because proving that they meet the duties test is like complicated. It has a lot of gray areas. If you don't get paid the right amount, you're not exempt. Period. And that's easy to prove. So employment attorneys look for that. And so that sounds like what was going on. And so if they're not exempt, they probably worked overtime. And even if, well, they're not punching a clock. So that's the other thing. They can just say, oh, I work 12 hours a day. And you have no record to disprove that because you thought they were exempt. And so, yeah, you can really get hurt by a case like that. No doubt. Absolutely.
See, I really wish we knew you then. And we've known you a long time, but dang, if I'd known, I'd have been like, hello, me, that's the thing. So when we talk about minimum wage today, this is part of like a warning, because
it is.
And so what I'm bringing up is, bringing two different problems together. But if any business is not keeping up on what California is doing in minimum wages, fast track, this is a huge deal. I know that the Fast Recovery Act. Yeah, Fast Recovery Act. So it's fast food. Okay. So it's for 60 employees or more per restaurant.
No, 60 restaurants in the United States.
Oh, they have to have that big.
That's the idea. It can't be just a mom and pop restaurant.
So Angelo's is fine. As we talked about the very first time, Angelo's Burgers.
They have 2 stores or something like that. Yeah, and they'll be fine. Yeah, but no, they are and they aren't, because you have these big chains that must pay at least $20 an hour. And then you have these small guys who are saying, well, no one wants to come work for me because I'm paying 18. And so it forces wages to come up at least. How high, it's hard to say, but there is a pressure to increase the pay so you can get some decent employees.
Wow. Okay. So it has its ripple effect for sure.
It does. Oh, absolutely.
So this was started in 2022, and everyone, Ward's articles linked in the episode notes. We'll be updating that some more as well as we get into the healthcare workers and what's going on in San Diego. But the Fast Recovery Act, this was started in 2022 when really I've heard so many different sides of this, but this is a national law, not just California. This is national where well, you know why I thought it was? Because I was listening to stuff in North Carolina when some of this was happening. I remember that now.
Well, and I also said you needed 60 stores throughout the country. And that is a requirement in California's Fast Recovery Act law.
Okay.
But it doesn't mean that it applies outside of California. That's just one of the requirements. So you have to have at least 60 stores anywhere in the U.S.
Okay, in the U.S.
I think let's just say the U.S. I think it's only U.S. Okay. So it's got to be a big store. That's the idea. It's got to be a big chain.
Okay.
But it only applies in California. And so the minimum wage in California went up, not the national minimum wage.
Okay. So the minimum wage for California went up. So does that affect the Fast Recovery Act? Or are they on their own bubble?
They're on their own track. You've got the minimum wage in California, which right now is $16.50. And you've got the minimum wage for fast food workers, if they work for a store that's big enough, that is $20. And in fact, I think it went up by cost of living this year, but don't quote me on that. It might be a little more than $20 now.
Wow. Okay. So if you live in California and you're going to do minimum wage, you want to be working for McDonald's or Burger King or something like that. That size.
Yes. Or a healthcare worker. Now, I know we're not going to talk much about it, but there's a whole separate set of laws that now have been applied to healthcare. And that applies to, it's really complicated. And that's why we're going to put this off till next time. But it applies to workers who work a minimum amount of time for a healthcare worker. And it goes anywhere from janitor all the way up to nurses. and interns.
Okay.
So, and again, this is so complicated. There are some groups of people, there are like 10 different groups of people, from janitors to guards, security guards, et cetera, et cetera. And then actual people who work directly with patients who have different amounts of or different levels of minimum wage. And so the lowest levels right now are at, I think, 1865, and it's going to change next month. So that would be like janitors, et cetera. But some groups are at 23 right now. But the idea is everyone's going to get to 25 eventually. Now, some won't get to $25 an hour until 2035, and some will get
Okay.
to $25 an hour in next year or the year after. I think it's 2027 is the first. But we'll get into all that in much more detail
Wow.
next time. But it's super complicated, but it is for healthcare related. That's probably a better way to describe healthcare related positions. So if you work for a hospital, and there are exemptions, if you work for a hospital that's just a lone hospital out in the middle of nowhere, doesn't apply to you. But, certainly chain hospitals, et cetera, it's going to apply to. City hospitals applies to. Then it also depends on whether you have most of your patients on Medicare and Medicaid. So there's special requirements for that type of hospital.
And that
Anyway,
could all change in a year anyway.
it could change. So it's
Wow.
complicated. Put it this way: not fast, healthcare related workers. So janitors get the benefit of this too. Have a minimum wage that's higher than the California minimum wage, and it's going to increase over time to $25 an hour.
Wow. So it looks like to me on the outside, who knows absolutely nothing, that each kind of industry is slowly creating their own coalition to speed along the minimum wage process because California is a little bit expensive to live in.
That's part of it. And that just really quickly, that's San Diego City Council is talking about increasing minimum wage for oh man, I should remember this. And hotels, tourism type places,
Hospitality.
hospitality. That's the word I'm looking for. Event centers. Our event centers downtown would all be part of this. And they're talking about making it $25 an hour. And the reason why I'm bringing this up now is one of the proponents of it in the city council says we need to make sure the people who work for these places can live in San Diego City and not have to live way out in the boondocks and drive in. So that's one reason. And that's what you touched on was, well, part of the reason is to make sure that people have enough money to live in these places. Yes, that is a common reason.
Well, this is a huge thing because in a lot of
It's huge.
tourism areas, you have vacation rentals and second homes that people buy, second to third homes, and they become Airbnbs, and they can't maintain their Airbnbs because they've bought up all the housing in these tourism areas. And the people who clean your toilets, who make the Airbnbs, and it's VRBOs, I don't care what it is, so I'm not just picking on one. I'm making sure because we're on a legal show. I don't want to get in trouble. But no, but this is a real thing. Hawaii dealt with it. California's dealing with it. It's a national thing. So people buy up these houses, then the income comes in. A lot of times, depending on where you live, where this is happening, they don't pay the taxes like the hotels pay. So hotels, when you check in somewhere, there's a tax. There's a city tax and then sometimes a hotel tax on top of that. That hotel tax usually goes into a so-called marketing fund. And if you have non-corrupt people, that money goes back into the businesses and promoting, like your San Diego tourism is getting that percentage and promoting San Diego as a destination. So that's what that tax does. TOTs, I think is what they call it in San Diego. If my memory reminds me, and then the city tax is the city tax, which helps to provide the extra infrastructure for the people coming into your city, right? But if more and more people keep buying out vacation homes and actually taking up the housing, and housing is still going up, part of the housing going up is because of this, then this is a reason that's part of it. And so this is crazy. So we're all just going to keep going up instead of balancing.
Okay, so the flip side of that coin is, and a lot of the opponents of the law that San Diego City is considering, is they say, well, all right, so if you pass this, that means we're going to have to pay our workers more. That's an expense. And so now we're going to have to charge more. And that means that what you're really doing is making all the people who go to the zoo, go to the amusement park, go to the convention center, whether they're in town or not, go to a hotel, pay more, which is probably right. And so, we'll see where this goes. But, there's a good reason to say, hey, we want to make sure people who are working for these types of businesses can live pretty
Yeah.
close. But then the other side is, well, how much do you want us to charge for our services? Because we're going to have to increase it because you've increased the cost. So there, two sides of that coin.
And Airbnb is part of it.
Airbnb, yeah, no, in terms of that, yeah, I agree with you. And I know that they've talked about different taxes for Airbnb locally, and I just really haven't followed it, so I don't know where all that is.
It kind of gets into that weird thing as Lyft and all of that, and Uber,
Yeah,
as we
same
talked
kind of
about.
thing.
It's that weird, zone of what it is. Business has just absolutely changed over the years. If you think about the last 20 years with the internet apps and developers, and they're born with coding in their brain. They know how to code before they talk. I mean, my childhood was far different than this, and look at Zoom meetings. I mean, you're doing court by Zoom. That's insane.
Yeah, it is.
To me, but then it's going to be kind of cool because you could kind of
And
be
we're
in
doing Zoom.
pajamas and nobody knows. Yeah. And I do have my pajama pants on. That's what I'm saying. It's like people can relax a little bit in some ways, but I think we're all navigating in this different way. But what I love what we do is you're telling people, hey, wake up. Don't ignore it. Because sometimes as business owners, especially the small businesses who do, they want to have a business, but you're risking everything to have a business. You want to pay your staff well, and then the staff need to be paid well. But then as these things happen, it's a double-edged sword either way. But that's a triple because it still affects like the client.
Oh, yeah.
So
I mean, who ends up paying it?
Yeah.
Client,
so basically,
mostly.
we're just increasing everything we pay instead of finding a balance somewhere. And so I know that the Airbnb, VRBO, the vacation rental thing, even if it's not done through any of those agencies, so don't sue me for this. We've got Ward here, and he's aggressive. So yes, yeah, exactly. But the reality is that is a disruptor in a market which everybody thought was good. Everybody jumped on the bandwagon. People make money. I know people with supplemented income. It's done wonderful things for people. And on the other hand, really hurt. So I think with this whole thing, we're learning and trying to balance. Then COVID, everybody is working remotely, and now suddenly everybody has to go to work. I'm still dealing with people only now having to go to work. Like they're just going, I don't know how to do this.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's been rolling out pretty slowly but steadily. Yes.
Yeah. And then what happens with minimum wage if you're working from home? Do you get to have that increase too? You know what I mean?
Well, sure. I mean, if you're an employee, sure.
Okay. All right. So San Diego is going through this, and we'll probably by next month have some more updates on that. So right now, okay, am I right? It's the AB 1228. The hourly rate for fast food workers went to 20 an hour.
Yes.
And they can actually still increase that, right? By 3.5%.
The lower of 3.5% of the cost of living.
Okay. So they're doing the cost of living. So this is part of that amalgamation where the actual people working on the bill are actually workers in the industry too, right? We should touch on that.
Yeah, there's a board that convenes, and it has parties from the government, parties from the employers, and parties from the employees all sitting
that's cool.
on the board. Yeah, no, it's a good concept. If you're going to do it, good concept.
Like we have national heritage areas. I know you love our national parks. We have what's called our national heritage areas. Okay. So that is it's like a partnership or a coalition between nonprofit organizations, downtown associations, businesses, and the National Park Service. So federal, state parks get involved to protect an entire region, including towns like Yuma, Arizona, down the road from you. It's hot there right now. That is a heritage area, but it incorporates state parks and everything like that. So it's kind of like that where everybody has a say. Sometimes that's great.
And I love national park. I love all parks. And I think it's really important to preserve spaces and keep them pristine. You just got to.
I think the heritage areas, which include the natural spaces, because it's like they're bringing the employees in on this too, from like tourism work. So it's all of them coming in, like we're talking about the Fast Recovery Act. So
Yes,
there's
very interesting.
multiple points of view. I think that's going to be actually one of the things that are either really in big trouble or going to be saved, because there's enough fingers in the pie, so to speak, to not let it fall away versus one entity. So the Fast Recovery Act is pretty strong, I think, if you have all three parts in there, is what I'm
Yes,
saying.
on the board and being able to give their opinions and input. Yes, I think it
And
is a
everybody
good
goes,
thing.
oh my God, I have to listen to somebody's opinion. Yes. Well, isn't that's the thing too. Are there expectations when, with all of this, that people, it gets political and people get crabby about the people that maybe that are working for them just because of what the bills are doing and what's happening? Like, is there discrimination stuff? Like, don't be mean to your employee just because you have to pay them more. It's not their fault. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, hopefully that doesn't happen, but they're not in a protected category just because they made a protected class, just because they make more. But if they're getting picked on because they're in one of the many different protected classes that we have in California, then yes. And often you can argue it even if it's not 100% clear. So I suppose it's possible that that could sneak in there from time to time.
I'm just
I don't think that employers, gosh, I haven't talked to an employer about this, but I'm going to venture an opinion. I don't think employers are mad at their employees for this. I think that they may be mad at the government for this.
Yeah, and that gets like, then everybody just, I've learned now through everything of all these different leadership things we've gone through over the last 30 years. I was always going anti-government, and now I'm actually going, I'm anti-politicians, specific politicians. And I've learned because certain government programs really do work. Some things work and shouldn't be taken away, national parks, right? And so I've realized that I've been saying anti-government for so long because it was a way to blame or just go, you know what I mean? So like you're saying about the employers. And so we actually have to look at who's putting what law in for what reason. Was it genuine, or did you make a pact with your buddy? So that's kind of what I've learned. And so, yes, we like to lump it on government, but I don't think we can,
That's interesting. Okay, so I'm going to pull that apart a little bit. That's
the attorney's coming in. He's going to get aggressive. Don't hurt me.
No, I'm gentle.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, you could say, you pass this law, I'm mad at you, Mr. Legislature or government or whatever.
There's a song with that, by the way.
Well, you can sing it later. But I think you make a good point that, well, those laws weren't made to necessarily harm you, Mr. Businessman, Mrs. Businessman. They're really made to help someone else. So sorry, but we're really trying to accomplish this goal. And so I think what you're saying is, well, it depends on the reasons why they're doing it more than what they're doing. And I guess I generally agree with that, but I have to say that, I'm a libertarian, so minimum wage doesn't make a ton of sense to me. And I know people out there are going to go, Ward, you said, no, seriously, here's why. Because it's not the market rate. And if you manipulate the market rate, there's fallout. And one of the fallouts is some businesses are going to close their doors. They will.
That is reality.
Yeah, it is.
No matter what, yeah.
And so is that better? Or is the other one better? And I see the competing values.
God.
And, which one makes the most sense? Those are tough questions. And I remember talking at a libertarian meeting once. I used to go to a few, but I don't anymore. And I said, look, as an attorney, I hear you that theoretically minimum wage isn't the best thing. I get it, because all libertarians believe. I mean, I've never met one that didn't believe that minimum wage was a market distortion. But it's not going away. It's really popular. So you just got to deal with it. And so you got to take into account what's trying to be accomplished. And so I agree with you there. I do agree.
Yeah, it's about what it is, and look at each thing specifically and not just blame the government as a whole, because you don't know who was in there doing what. It's easy to generalize, let's put it that way, and to blame one entity.
I agree.
And we start doing that instead of actually learning beyond the headline, is my point. And I think I kind of really got that over the last few years of like, you know what? We're not actually reading the real stuff. It's hard to swallow. And that's what I love about you being on these shows, because we get to be silly and make it a little fun and actually make it understandable. Because even, as an employee, you don't understand half of the laws that are there for you. You don't. And the employer may just be really good at making the best pizza. And if you do make the best pizza here, we're here. But you may be really just, I'm in pizza mode and I don't understand. I'm a pizza artisan. I don't understand what Ward's telling me about minimum wage. Just, so
Well, and all the
important.
nuts and bolts, I'm definitely good at all that kind of stuff,
And you'll
and I
eat the
help both
pizza.
employers and employees. Again, you grow up over time, and you go. At least for me, and it sounds like for you, you start seeing different perspectives a little bit more, and you go, I see where they're coming from. That's not bad. It's really not bad.
Yeah, find something from both sides, and that's where I think America's got to kind of learn on that and understand people do need to live. And if it's getting expensive out there, something's got to give. And that's in nature we see that, right? Something's going to give at some point. So
Well, absolutely.
yeah, so minimum wage is not something to mess with. So if you are not paying your employees their minimum wage that is due, the new uprated thing, they're going to get in doo-doo. Like that's kind of like an
Oh
open shut
no,
case.
no, absolutely. If you're paying less than minimum wage, that's going
You're
to
in
be a
doo-doo.
miserable end unless you're lucky.
Aggressive. And he's telling you
It's
don't do it.
it can be miserable.
Well, I'm looking forward to next month. We'll talk about the healthcare workers and also see what's going on with San Diego a little bit
Well,
more.
did we want to mention the
Oh,
minimum wage in California, the minimum
yeah.
salary?
Oh, yes, the salary. Sorry, we did leave it out.
Yeah, just real fast.
No, it's good.
1650 is the minimum wage in California, and there are different municipalities and even counties may have different levels of minimum wage. So San Diego, for instance, the minimum wage is $17.25. So if you work in the city of San Diego, you make more than someone who works outside the city, just outside the city of
So
San
in
Diego.
like Alpine is different.
Right, it would be different. Yep.
Okay.
Unless they have their own municipal law that would increase it. But I don't think Alpine does, for instance. And then the minimum salary for an exempt employee is based on the California minimum wage. So it's 2 times the California minimum wage, which is $16.50, times the number of hours a full-time worker works. So that's in a year, that's 2,080, and it ends up being 68,640. Is it? I've got it written down somewhere. Yes, 68,640. And that's a big chunk to get someone exempt.
Yeah. So we've got all the numbers there for everyone. It's all linked in the episode notes so you can double check everything. Make sure you're getting paid and make sure you're paying correctly so you don't get in doo-doo. What happens if someone hasn't been doing the right thing, especially in the unincorporated areas? Can they call you as a company and go, hey, Ward, I think I've messed up. Is there anything I can do right now since I haven't been doing it correctly? Like if I go and pay them now, am I going to be sending a red flag? You know what I mean? If you realize if you've been a bad
Those are
employer.
tricky situations, and it's really a case by case. I have to understand what's going on with that employer, and we can come up with a strategy that we think is best for that
Sometimes
business.
if they don't know, you raise like, oh, by the way, you've got some back pay. Well, why? You know what I mean? That could become tricky.
Yes, it can. It really can. And so you really have to be delicate in how you deal with a situation like that. And I have talked to, I don't know, maybe a dozen employers over the years about that specific kind of thing. And yeah, you need to powwow with an attorney and come up with a good strategy for you.
Okay, last thing, you were talking about San Diego City itself has its own minimum wage. Okay, so
Yes.
the unincorporated areas like Julian, it's going to go with the county wage and the federal wage. State,
No, state wage.
not county.
We don't
Okay.
have a county wage.
So what happens, like Encinitas is a city, right? And does it have its own minimum wage? Can it get its own minimum wage?
Certainly it could. Don't believe they do. I honestly, I've been doing this a long time and I haven't seen, like an Encinitas specific minimum wage. You know what?
I was just using it as an example, like
Yeah,
different cities. Are the cities, because
different
San
cities.
Diego,
No, I think Oceanside might.
yeah, Oceanside might.
I think it might.
Even
What happens is if someone asks me a question, because there's so many cities throughout California, and someone
Sure.
calls me up, and certain cities
have
I'll
to
go,
look up
oh
the
yeah,
law.
LA, yeah, you got a different minimum wage. San Francisco,
Oh.
certainly, and
Okay.
in the Bay Area, there's many different cities with many different minimum wages. San Jose, yeah, a lot of them in the Bay Area, and so, but they're all listed, and so it's easy to find. So if someone comes to me and says, "Hey, I live in this town, city, and I'm paying the state minimum wage. Is that right? It won't take me too long to tell you whether it is or isn't.
Yeah, yeah. Because they change too all the time. And California is a massive
Yep.
state. It's a big state that
Yes.
you pick to represent, and a good one because they keep changing laws. It's smart and aggressive. So, and
What a
libertarian.
combo.
Yeah, but he likes to go to national parks, so you know he's good.
Okay.
Yeah, you are. Well, Ward, always fun. Best Employment Attorney San Diego.com is his website. So connect with him there, and you can always give him a call and set up an appointment to ask some questions there before anything happens. So check that out. And I've also got the link to his article in the episode notes, or just go to blendradioandtv.com and type in Ward 2000 and see what comes up. Who knows? Ooh.
Exciting.
All right. Ward, looking forward to next month. We'll talk about the healthcare workers. That sounds like it's going to be a doozy, and I kind of understand why. Kind of like the fast track, Yeah, it's
The FAST Act, yeah.
I call it fast track, but yeah, fast act. And it kind of makes sense in the hospitality world too, because you don't want some of your best employees to walk out of the hospital. That's a big bad doo-doo.
Yeah,
you don't hospital
really, we're going to get in the weeds on this. It's really complicated.
Boy.
So we're going to have some fun with that. And then, of course, we'll mention the San Diego hospitality worker ordinance and see where it is. It hasn't been passed yet, and they're still working on it. So hopefully I'll have some new information about it, but I might not. And then we'll just talk about the healthcare situation, which will take up a whole show, I think.
Wow. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here on Big Blend Radio. Take care, Ward. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you. You too.
Thank you for listening to Big Blend Radio's California Employment Law Podcast with San Diego attorney Ward Heinrichs. Keep up with Ward at bestemploymentattorneysandiego.com or follow him on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also subscribe to Big Blend Radio at bigblendradio.com.